2, 3, 4, boom. Down here to get away. Hustle, the city just wasn't made. Found a town that ain't worth noting. Skies and roads are wide open. It feels like I'm getting back to my roots. Switched out my sneakers for a pair of boots. Just gotta find community. I know there's
Hi everyone, welcome back to Way Out Here, a podcast for remote and small town queers. I'm having so much fun with this. Loving meeting you, and I can't wait to meet so many more people and have great conversations. It's just a lot of fun, and I think everyone deserves to tell their story. I told my story on a podcast once, and it just was so fun and so validating and created so much community. And it's just great. Yeah. Okay, you guys, did you hear the new song? Camel Toe has now fully written it out and produced it, and it sounds amazing. It sounds awesome. I just totally love it. So definitely listen till the end, or jump to the end to listen to the full song. And you have to check out Camel Toe with a K on Spotify because they are freaking awesome. Camel Toe has been doing the remote van life living thing for a long time, and we'll be moving to Idaho soon. So that's awesome. I am drinking this delicious little shakerito thing I made with oat milk and cinnamon. My new favorite coffee, Mod Cup. Mod Cup is based in New York, and their whole thing is that coffee is a fruit. And my friend turned me onto this because I was drinking basically all dark roast, which according to him was a total sin. So I am really obsessed with this coffee. It is so fruity and it's delicious. Try their fruity note flavors and you will seriously be picking up so much fruit that it's going to blow your mind. And it's so, so good. I made my cold brew with this, and that's what I made my drink out of today. By the way, I'm not sponsored by anyone right now, so this is pure, genuine recommendation. My hot drinks, cold drinks of the week, my tea. Let's see. What the fuck happened this week? Because I do live in the middle of nowhere and I have a house, I'm doing a lot of house projects. I'm rebuilding my garage right now. It's going to be built on a real foundation, which is really important for if I ever want to connect the house to the garage. Right now, they are separate. It's a detached garage, which means in the winter, I am walking out of the garage into the snow. And, so one of these years, I might build either a little breezeway or just an overhang kind of thing. I don't know. But here's a fun fact. In order to connect a house to a garage, both of them have to have a real foundation. So that's a legal thing. So now my garage has a real foundation and that's all it has. And hopefully the rest of the building will be done by winter. But I'm really excited about it. I'm getting bigger garage doors so I can back in without barely making it with an inch on each side. I'm getting a utility door in the back. So if I have a lawnmower in there or something, I can ride it right back out to the backyard. And then it's now going to be right in front of my pathway up to the house. So I can go straight from the garage to the house. And that's just my big project of the year. So that is what I'm working on. In other news, I have a leaking porch roof that I thought would be solved by replacing my shitty gutters, but it has not been solved. So I'm going to patch it up myself this week. I am definitely not a home improvement influencer or an influencer of any kind. In fact. Okay, so today, my guest today, Jenna, learned to homestead in Idaho and now lives in upstate New York. I wore this shirt, Country Queers Can Survive, because it was too perfect. This is just one of the coolest guests I'll ever have on. She's so cool. She farms. She raises falcons. She sells products from her farm. She does graphic design. She writes. She's published several books and is working on more and just living the legit full farm life. It was really fun to talk to her about all her projects, all her animals, the writing, and also being a late bloomer to lesbianism. That is something that I completely relate to because I came out at age 30. It's just a really different experience to come out a little bit later in life than some people. So this was an awesome episode. I'm so excited for you all to meet Jenna. She's got a Substack for her writing. We'll plug all those at the end, but you'll definitely want to check her out and subscribe to her Substack. And without further ado, enjoy our conversation. Way Out Here. Welcome to Way Out Here.
Welcome. Thanks for having me.
How is life on the farm?
For right now, things on the farm are good. It's been a really busy and fast summer, but so far all's going as planned.
Awesome. Do you want to tell us a little bit about where you live?
I'm a farmer and a writer living in upstate New York, north of the Hudson Valley area. And basically, it's a very small town. I technically live in the suburbs of an even smaller town. There's a town called Cambridge, which is a very small town here in Washington County, New York. And I technically live in the suburbs of Cambridge. So I live in the outer area of a 2,000 person, one stoplight town.
So teeny tiny and then even more remote.
Yep, yep, yep.
All right. When did you move out there? What kind of drove you to live the farm life?
Well, I think it's part of my coming out story.
Oh, this is fun.
Oh, definitely. I had to come out as a farmer before I could come out as a lesbian. Um,
I don't know which is harder.
for me, farmer, but I was raised in a really small conservative home in Pennsylvania and in a very small, maybe 5,000 people, so double the size of the town I'm in now. But I was raised like in a home that was very conservative, but not necessarily religious. So
Interesting.
I think a lot of people, a lot of queer people that grow up in like conservative homes, it's much more like, like don't be gay because you'll burn in hell or whatever Fertile Crescent mythology your family's into. But like for me, it was more like there's like a way to present yourself in society and like a kind of person we want to be. And religion was always like we went to mass every Sunday in a Catholic home, but it was much more about like culturally being seen at church, like having the
Hmm.
education and like understanding Catholicism. But to my parents' credit, it was a lot more cerebral. It wasn't supposed to be like this is black and white thinking, or at least that wasn't how it was presented to me in my home, which is I think great.
It wasn't presented as reality, it was more tradition.
I think it was like you're Catholic in the way that you're Slovak in the way that you're
Hmm.
American. Like it's part of like your identity. But I don't think my parents were ever like, and I don't identify as a Catholic. I'm not practicing, obviously.
I don't know. I saw at Dyke March there were Catholic lesbians holding a sign, and I was like, hey, if you can somehow wrap your mind around that, you
You
go,
get one
girl.
life, live it however you want. Exactly. But like my family wasn't, they were very conservative in the way of like politics, conservative politics. That was my mom was the first political science major from the university we both went to in Pennsylvania. And it was just a very like it was your job to be engaged as a citizen and like a part of your community. And those are values that
Hmm.
I've had my entire life. So I was just raised not so much in a way that being gay was bad, but being gay was like being from Sicily. Like there's nothing wrong with being Sicilian, but you're not Sicilian, Jenna. Like, don't worry about it. And I was always worried
Oh,
about it because as soon as I could tell what I was into, I was like, oh, I shouldn't be this. And it was
yeah.
never, and I don't think people have to grow up in these like brimstone homes, like where people are being threatened with hell as much as all it takes is that low hum of homophobia in
Mhm.
society for
Mhm.
a lot of
Yeah.
people to never want to be who they are.
Yeah, a lot of the time it's more social than it is religious. Like it's not like it's not like we were I mean, I was raised extremely religious, but it's not like the message I was getting was really that different from what society was hinting to me. If people are fighting against gay marriage, you think that's the law, that's a legal thing. And if it's not even legal, it's like as bad as smoking pot. Haha. There's a lot of like, especially older queers that are like, I never expected marriage. Marriage is bullshit. Like, who cares? But for a lot of us, it's the societal acceptance that like the legal side of it actually does really impact how we are accepted in society. Like, my mom does not view gay marriage nearly as bad as she did when it was illegal. Like that simple thing.
Yep. Yeah.
So then, where did you go from there? You said you went to college in Pennsylvania or the same college as your mom?
Yeah, it's just a state school in Pennsylvania, but she was there for a different reason. I learned a trade. I learned graphic design at a four-year
Me
university.
too.
Good for you. Congratulations.
Thank you.
I went to college and I was so closeted for so long. And I think a lot of people, I didn't come out until I was 36.
Can I ask before we get to that, or just as a aside, do you know how old you were when you thought you were gay?
Yeah, there was definitely a point. I knew when I was 17. I was,
Ooh,
the,
that's hard.
the short, it's hard. It's sure hard because I had like a high school boyfriend at the time and nothing ever felt right. And I was so
Mhm.
terrified like to an OCD level terror of being pregnant. And I think that was my way of like protecting myself. Like, that's not the life for you. Like, whatever you
Mhm.
do, don't get married, don't have kids, because I wasn't ready to accept that I was queer, but I just knew that meant my future as I wanted it was not going to happen. So there was always
Yeah.
that real gut fear of ever getting pregnant. And when you're raised really like Catholic or religious, it's so much easier to be avoiding sexual situations, as I'm sure you can
Mhm.
relate to.
Yeah.
Um, it was never about like I said, fear of hell or religion. It was more so just there's a way to present yourself in the world. And just growing up I grew up in the 80s, 90s, and I was a young adult in the early 2000s. So it's amazing how much different things are now, like, just with
Yeah.
YouTube and, like, the representation people can get and see. There's so many millennials coming out now because we didn't even know we could order off the in-flight menu.
Yeah.
Things that came really easily to people that are, like, 14 that are figuring this out. Like, I knew what I wanted as a young adult, but it was so pressed down. I was just like, "Well, we don't have to deal with this right now." And,
Mhm.
um,
Yeah.
I didn't deal with it for another 20 years.
I mean, I relate to so much of that. So, like in Mormonism, people get married really young. Like a lot of people get married at 18, 19, 20. Like that's very normal. There's like kind of a joke at the Mormon universities that you go for an MRS degree, like Mrs.
Oh, wow.
It took me a long time to figure out what people were talking about. But like that was never why I was at school. And I there were a lot of times that men wanted to marry me and I would just like run for the hills. I would just be like, no. Cause like you said, it's not like, I wasn't even having sex. So it wasn't about sex, even. It was like, I cannot picture my future with you. Like, what are you thinking? You don't know me. And that's exactly what it is because your fear of pregnancy. You're like, I just could never have that full future with you.
No.
And you don't know why. And it's like everyone around you getting married and you're just like running away from it every time and you're like something's wrong with me.
So how did you know, especially when you're surrounded by, like, all your peers and friends, and you must be going to a bunch of weddings and stuff. What did, like, your family ask you?
Well, first of all, I was always judgmental of like all the girls that got married fast. I was always so judgmental of their choice of man. I was like, ugh, what? Like, what do you see in this person at all? Now that is clear why I feel that way because all
Sure,
of
of
the
course
men
not.
were not good enough. But no, it literally took leaving religion for me to even question my sexuality. I had no idea. I had to deconstruct Mormonism entirely. It was basically during my first relationship with a man that I call it my first real relationship with a man because it was the first time I was having sex. So that's like very different. But once I had deconstructed my entire worldview, suddenly it was like anything was on the table. I was questioning everything about life, about America, about society, like what is normal, what is not, just question everything. And
Well, congratulations. You're very lucky. Yeah, it could be worse.
so do you want to talk a little bit about your 20s? Like what did life look like during that time?
My story is different than a lot of people's. It's kinda dramatic, but it's very, I think, relatable emotionally. I grew up in this small town. I got a design degree. My first job out of college, I got hired to work at a television network down in the South. So I moved from Pennsylvania to the South by myself. I was in Tennessee, and it was the only time I lived in a city. It was like a year and a half I lived in Knoxville. And just being a part of the world was so exciting, and
Mhm.
in my brain, there's so much comp het in me that I had talked myself that if any man wasn't repulsive to me and funny and nice, then I was supposed to be attracted to him.
I relate.
Yeah, I would go on a date and it would be like, "Okay, like, we can hang out, but, like, I don't wanna sleep with you." I would just say that, like, on the first date, and they would either think I was being funny and, like, charming, or they would think it was, like, a bit, but I think I'm so gay. I couldn't believe anyone thought I was straight.
A lot of men do not believe women when they say they don't want to sleep with them. They're like, no. Like, even when you tell them multiple times you just want to be friends, they're like, no, until you fully come out as gay.
So I didn't know I was queer. I mean, I knew, like, in a very traumatized, compartmentalized, like, buried down deep part of me, I knew that a part of me instinctually wanted to be with women,
Hmm.
but it was just so not an option for me, and I wasn't ready to deal with it. So my 20s, I went to college and I got this job, like I said, and I was 5 years out of college and had moved I moved from Tennessee, then I moved to Idaho, and then I lived in Idaho for a while, and then I know you're from Idaho,
No,
right?
I just went to school there.
I lived in Sandpoint. Who knew I would end up in Idaho? But, I was there for a while, and then the recession happened, and I moved back east. I'm from the East Coast, so I got a job in Vermont, and I was living in Vermont, and it was just 5 years after college, I bought this farm in upstate New York.
That's amazing.
Kinda, but I was only wild and on my own in the world for, like, 5 years, that I wasn't, like, under my parents', like, watch as a minor, and then, like, living in the world, just driving around the country, not dealing with my sexuality, not really dating, and I think to come back to how I had to come out as a farmer first, I think as a little girl and growing up, there was a certain way I was supposed to live and a certain way I was supposed to be. I was supposed to go to college, get a really good job, get married, have kids, and then continue on the family traditions and life and religion and all that kind of stuff. And I think when you're queer and you know that that's never really going to be the real you, there is like a resentment that both parent and child can kind of build up where no one really deals
Hmm. Yeah.
with what's happening until because none of our parents, especially if we were raised in conservative homes, are going to be like helping us figure out who we
No.
are in that sense, you know? Like, and if there's any ink, like there's so many queer things I did. I had a mullet and a cheerleader practice. Like it
That's
was,
awesome.
it's, you know, it's just, yeah. And like, I, like my mom let me be a little weird queer kid, but I think I was just taught to like, not even taught explicitly, just like through how I was raised, there was a way to be and how to act. And there were just stepping stones, college, job,
Mhm.
house, marriage, like, or whatever, or kids. And I just knew that was never going to be me. And so I think there was a point like in my late 20s where I knew something wasn't right and I wasn't being authentic and I wasn't ready to come out yet. So I I was like, I am not meant to be a corporate graphic designer. I'm meant to be a farmer. Like that's how I'm going to be free. I'm going to quit the chains of this corporate job and I'm going to work for myself and I'm going to live on my own farm and I'm going to have a creative life. And so when you tell people who've raised you, who helped sign the loans that got you through college, you know what I mean? That this career I have and this job, this great job I have with a 401k and health insurance, I'm walking away from that. I think for my folks, that was a bigger shock.
Yeah.
I think they wished I would have come out and said I was gay, then said I'm going to become a feral adult woman. And you know, and so I lived alone. And to summarize a lot of stuff, I lived alone on this mountain, on this farm for about a decade. And I had to get through like 10 winters, learning like all these country and farm skills, riding horses, teaching archery, like falconry, all this stuff that I got into.
Did you know any of that before? Did you have
No, I got
any
no, this is
skills?
all no, I was a graphic designer who lived in Knoxville and works for HGTV. Like, I didn't know how to I didn't know how to harness a horse and train a hawk. Like, I didn't know how to do like, I mean, I didn't know how to do
Amazing.
any of this stuff. Yeah, but I mean, it's amazing what a gay person can accomplish when they don't wanna deal with being gay. So, I had owned this home, had lived this life, and if it wasn't for the farm and the animals and the life I lived here, I would not have had the confidence to come out.
Mhm.
I think I would have stayed in the closet. I would have 100% married whatever guy made me laugh and paid attention to me, and I would assume if we had a loveless, sexless marriage, that's just being straight,
Yeah.
because that's what I would hear from all my other straight friends that were in marriages they were miserable in. Yeah, so I that's my story. I had to be this. I had to become the person I admired before I could have the confidence in myself to deal with myself. And it has a lot to do with representation. I didn't see any other queer people like me. Queer people I knew were like Ellen and Rosie O'Donnell,
I hear that
and
so
I didn't
much.
identify with any of them. Yeah, because that's who we had growing. I'm 42. So like that's what I saw. Like I always joke that I saw more like they were more like cartoon animals kissing on screen than women. Like I saw lions fall in love and tell their dynasty story on cartoons before I saw 2 women kiss,
Yeah.
and I remember the first kiss I saw on television, I went through, like, an existential crisis at 17. I couldn't deal with what I was feeling, I almost had a panic attack. We really do tell on ourselves, and it's amazing what we will repress just to feel like we're part of what we were told was okay.
Absolutely. I read this awesome article, How Rom-Coms Made Me Think I Was Straight. Because in rom-coms, the woman starts out hating the man, like in these
Yeah,
rom-coms that we grew up
exactly!
with. Like very often, it's like When Harry Met Sally. You have this like disgusting man. She hates him. And then somehow by the end, like after all the times she told him she's just friends, like she falls in love with him. And you're like, this is so implausible. And this kind of trope happens over and over. As a queer person, you see that and you're like, I'm supposed to be repulsed by the man I'm going to fall in love with. It like turns into conditioning, very real conditioning for a young developing mind.
Right. Yeah. And it wasn't like gay people were a secret. Like they were on television, and my parents had queer friends, but it was like family friends and stuff. It was the time when like everyone said, "Hi, this is my partner so and so," and nobody asked questions after that. No one asked how your life was, how your summer was, like what are you two doing this holiday season? It was more like, "Oh, okay," and like politely go on and get another hors d'oeuvre. People don't know how. I think that's like the biggest misconception people have about queer people is that, especially if you're an out queer person, or like in my case and in your case, in some point, professionally queer, I think they instantly like they associate that with sex, like as if our sexuality means our
Hmm.
whole life and our identity. Like there's something almost sordid about having like a rainbow sticker on the back of your car, like as if you're talking about your sex life and not about.
Well, that's the issue with like,
Right, I think to straight people, it's a lot more about like, they think we're talking about who we sleep with and not, like, who we are. It really bothers me that that there is, like, this idea that, like, well, of course my kids can watch Disney movies with a men and woman, like a prince and princess kissing because that's normal, but we can't handle the sexualization of 2 girls kissing, like, that means we have to talk about sex. I'm like, "Did you have to talk to your kids about sex when Aladdin kissed Jasmine?"
it's very obvious that, like, kids that are raised to be told, oh, and here's a bunch of types of families. Like, they do not have an issue with it. And they're like, okay.
They are fine. It took me a long time to figure out who I was, and I think a lot of people, more so than ever, a lot of women are figuring out who they are, like, a little delayed because we didn't get to see that.
Okay. So you lived 10 years on the farm, closeted. And were you dating during this time? I mean, it's like, it's easy not to because you're in the middle of nowhere, right?
I think my excuse was, I'm following this dream, and I'm changing my life, and I just poured everything into my writing. I mean, in my 20s, I published 6 books. I've been writing my whole life, and I never like went to school for it. But after college, I went and I started blogging before blogs were blogs. You know what I mean? So I've been writing every day, and it's just something I did. And when I moved to Idaho from Tennessee, I rented a retired cattle farm, and I was just there for the farmhouse because it was close to my office. I could bike to work. And so I was living on this farm, and I had already been toying. I was like farm curious. Like I was ready
Yeah.
to like I had to like learn, like I was reading hobby farm magazines and like looking at like, I was it was the very beginning rise of like the urban homesteading movement was in the early 2000s and stuff. So being a person who could write decently enough to get ideas across and was starting to toy with homesteading, I was able to pitch some books to some publishers like, hey, I'm a brand new person to this. Do you want to read like a young person's guide to learning how to become a farmer? Like, I could basically make memoirs about learning how to do this as someone with no experience. And it could be my way into getting professionally writing. So I wrote a couple memoirs about learning to farm, no talk of sexuality. Like, I'm single this entire time.
Do you want to name the books so that people can find them?
If you Google me and on Amazon, you'll find my books. But, but mostly I'm like a 25-year-old idiot who doesn't know who she is or what she wants, but she knows I am driven in a way I can't explain to get out of this lifestyle I was trained to be in and to be free in what was to me more wild and natural and where I felt I belonged. And at the time, I thought that meant self-employed as a farmer, and what I wanted to do was kiss a girl. But that was so much harder. That was so much harder to me, like, to deal with and get to the point, and I didn't kiss a girl till I was 37, haven't quit since. Yeah, but I mean, it's just it's the like, the best, like, I'm so happy to say that, like, I know I'm a 42-year-old woman, but I feel so excited about life every day, and I'm so excited about what could happen and who I could meet and who I could it's just I don't think a lot of people get to experience this, like, not only second adolescence, but, like, a literal rebirth when you come out later in life. It is holy.
It's so beautiful. Like, literally, some days I just jump up and down for joy because I am myself. And it doesn't even matter if I'm dating someone, if I have prospects, whatever. It's literally a part of your identity. That's why it's so important for people to come out. It's not even about dating, it's about who you are and what you feel in your soul. And it's a beautiful thing.
Yeah. It's about being gay at the grocery store. I love that when young teenagers see me and, like, I wore my hat for this thing, not because I need to wear a hat in my house, but because this is how people see me when I, like, walk around town or, like, I'm this person all the time everywhere I go, and I remember seeing queer people as a young person. I lived in an Appalachian Trail town off the Appalachian Trail, and, like, all these, like, rad women who were just giving up, summer of their life to hike across America. They weren't, of course, all queer, but I could tell who was queer, and I would just they were like goddesses going through
Their
town, like
long silver
so I would
hair.
when yeah, you just would, like, see cool people, so I just remember being in awe of women and being in awe of women who were living a life outside of what I was taught or what, like, conventionally was what we're supposed to do as our roles, and some of us, like, can just look at that and be excited and be like, "Yeah, that's me," and some of us, unfortunately, like me, had to, like, basically cosplay until I made it, and I definitely made it. Like, I'm so happy with who I am, and but that was the hardest part of my 20s wasn't dealing with homosexuality as much as dealing with not thinking I deserve to be happy. I think a queer people
Totally.
are taught, like, there's something wrong about what you feel and what you need, so I knew I was gay when I was 17. I didn't know I deserved to be gay until I was 36.
Yeah. And the insight about deserving is so real because if we can teach young kids that they deserve joy and they deserve to be happy in all regards, then they will accept this part about themselves too. Everyone deserves happiness, like not just the heteronormative ones, not just the neurotypical ones, not just, yeah, like everyone deserves happiness. You just have to find how do I get to that happiness for me, like as a personalized journey for me. And I think when I was Mormon, like there was so much perfectionism culture. Basically, if you weren't happy, it meant that you were doing something wrong. So I was like pushing, pushing, pushing to be a better person, a better person. Like, I'm going to work in the temple. I'm going to like volunteer here. I'm going to do
Was
this.
it, like, reward merit-based?
Oh, totally.
Were you like, "If
Yeah.
I'm unhappy, it's because
Yeah.
I wasn't good enough to be happy, like, I don't deserve God's love?"
Yeah, it's like a mind fuck though, because you're like, but if I am happy, it's because God's blessing me. So it's almost like the positive is always credited to God, the negative is always credited to the person.
Death cults are fucking wild. Christianity's great if that's how you wanna live your life, but, like and I'm sure there's plenty of people that are listening that identify as that religion, but I don't understand, will never understand why what you believe in your relationship should with God should have to be mandated through humanity as a whole.
I think it's just a simple like lack of empathy. It's just assuming that what's right for me is right for you. Coming out as queer and even as non-religious made me have a lot more empathy for every type of person that has a different experience through life or a different viewpoint. Even, like I very strongly identify as a woman, but like when someone says they're non-binary, I fully believe them because of my experience of feeling like a woman. Because I'm like, yeah, if I didn't feel that, what would I feel? And if I didn't have like examples to identify with. But yeah, it's like a lot of people, if they haven't had the exact experience, they just can't relate. But I think it takes a little bit of like shaking your own foundation to be able to have that.
Yeah, or get your foundation shook.
Yes.
You know, something has to Did you experience people knowing you were queer before you did? Like, did other queer people kinda figure it out and,
Okay.
like, try to help you along the way?
No one tried to help me, but there were girls who hit on me, and I was just like, "Oh, this is uncomfortable," because like I don't know what's happening, and just
Oh,
like this is
wow.
not normal behavior, is what I viewed it as. So like I can think back from honestly from elementary school through high school, girls who flirted with me or like were trying to do something with me, and I just was like, "This behavior is unnatural. I don't know what's happening." But it wasn't even like I wasn't even thinking they're gay. I just was like, they're just weird. Like,
I think that's what we're taught, though, that's what we're taught. I remember once at a slumber party, I like a lot of young queer kids, I didn't realize I was in love with my, like, middle school, high school best friend, but of course I was, and I remember at a slumber party once, like, the closest I ever got to, like how girls sometimes will practice kissing at slumber parties and stuff? Nothing like that ever
I
happened to me,
wish that
but,
never happened to me.
I know, I know,
We would have
never happened
figured
to me.
it out
I would've
so
been
much
terrified.
faster. Yeah.
No, you and I would not have kissed because we would have been into it, we would have been watching all the straight girls kiss,
No,
but,
honestly, I think I would have been
like
scared too because I would have been like embarrassed. Even if I stared at a girl for too long, I would feel embarrassed because like you're not supposed to do that. It's like, yeah.
Oh my gosh. I saw like a high school like boyfriend's younger, like a year younger, like my age high school girl was just laying on a watching a movie on the floor and her shirt was up enough that I could see her lower back and I felt like that
Ugh,
was scandalous.
yes.
That I could see the lower back of someone who was a high school like the same lower backs I saw in gym class. It was just like I'm like, "Oh my gosh, we're in her house. I can't see her body."
Can I ask, when you were writing, as you were writing Living Alone, did that help you come out? Like, going through your own thoughts, and or was there anything that came up around this during your writing?
God, you know what? It should've. Like, you're the first person to ask me that. I would write about loneliness a lot, which and isolation a lot, and I think those are very for any late bloomer, our coming out story is also an isolation story. Like, we were either isolated from who we were or from our community. I think I wrote about that a lot.
Being a late bloomer in general is very isolating, just because first of all, you're in a different place than most queer people. And then, like, the dating pool is smaller because a lot of queer people have already settled down with each other or whatever. And that's on top of already having a small dating pool. Yeah, loneliness is definitely like a common theme.
It is. Like, I've had to import everyone I've dated pretty much, you know, like, I live in the middle of nowhere, which has been great too. It's just that there are queer people. There is a beautiful queer community around here in this little town. It's just that everyone is, like, 21 or in high school, or they are, like, retired and have like, working on painting their second vacation home, because people our age are in New York or Providence or whatever, and the life I wanted to have, I couldn't have in a city.
Yeah,
I think the country's about to get a lot queerer because we can work remotely now and like I bought my farm for 150K. You know what I mean?
that's
Like that's a farm.
insane.
That's in New York State. Like that was 2010.
I thought
But
my
I mean
house
it's not
was
like my
cheap.
value's gone up that much. Dude, I mean that was 2010. In Washington County where I live, we're 3.5 hours from New York City. But
Hmm.
like this land in Cambridge outside of Boston or like anywhere around, it would be millions of dollars to have 6.5 acres by gay people.
My house would easily be $5 million in like anywhere near a city.
Like in Los Angeles. Yeah, 100%. Like, it's
I'm like, I have a fucking river in the backyard. Like,
I have a stream, I have a pond. But yeah, it's lovely, and, the country's about to get a lot queer. Small towns are gonna get a lot queerer because people can afford homes, they can commute, they can work remotely. Whenever you turn on the news, I don't care what your politics are or whether you do or do not believe in climate change, or there's just constant news about how hard it is getting to live, both by, like, the economy, like, weather, like I think that people will be moving more rurally just by force and, because 'cause it'll be a better way to live, to make a living. So our communities will grow.
I mean, there's a couple things here. Like, the cities are getting a little bit stressful. Like, there's a lot going on. It's, I think, hard for a lot of people to stay in the city financially, like you said, but it's also like stress and unrest rising in cities. COVID also really changed a lot of cities. Like, Aaron and I were talking about how in San Francisco, the city really died and has never bounced back. Like, it really changed from the city it was that we knew growing up or whatever to what it is now. And then the other thing is, we can live wherever we want. And like, maybe it doesn't feel quite as safe as living in a city, that's for sure. But it's like, we don't have to just isolate ourselves to the city in order to be safe.
Yeah. 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 I think, and I think especially with queer women, I'm vastly generalizing, but I think a lot of queer women are a little more outdoorsy, a little more willing to like live quote unquote rurally than like I think the gay man like stereotypically clearly talking, but there's supposed to be this like almost cottagecore fantasy that like oh we can live in the country together and you know grow vegetables and ride our horses off to the sunset. So it's just like it's I just think that there is like a idealistic kinda, like, pull for women to have kinda like that, like, country fantasy life in a way. Like, I wanna live with my wife and make jam, you know?
I mean, look at Brandy Carlisle and her wife. Yes.
Yeah, I do live that life. That is my life. The opposite of that is I don't know how to get an Uber. I don't know how to do a lot of city stuff. Like I you can't, but I mean like if you were to hand me your phone and say, "Get us movie tickets for tonight," I would figure it out. It would be embarrassing when we went to the movie theater and I didn't realize I had to download the app to actually show the tickets. Like it's just I could show you how to hunt deer with a bow and arrow. I could show you how to make cheese from milk. Like I'm great in the apocalypse. I can't wait to relax. It's just that
You're like, can the world just end already?
yeah, I could use the nap, but that's how I make a living out here. I'm a professional writer and farmer and freelance designer. So if I'm not outside like working to raise the animals and food that I sell to people, I'm inside doing farm logos, writing,
Hmm.
like publishing on my Substack, or doing my own podcast. That's how it is out here. I think you'll find that a lot of rural queers, whether they're a farmer or like in your situation, like I believe you do software work or computers, something
Hmm.
like that.
Yeah.
I got to listen to an episode before. But, like, a lot of us have a lot of hats. We do a lot of things,
Yeah.
and I think that's the asset of queer people in small towns. Like, we really are, like, the polymath, like, the ones that you can go to for a lot of different skills and interests, and I think we're really versatile people. And if you're a queer
Hmm.
person living in the country, you wanna be there.
Yeah.
I think we're very valuable people to have in a small town.
I think so too. Do you want to talk a little bit about what you sell and your farm?
Cold Antler Farm is the name of my farm, and I mostly focus on pork and lamb. So I raise pig and sheep. It's only 6.5 acres, so it's a very small operation. I also grow vegetables, and I have chickens and geese and train birds for falconry. So there's some wild birds here, and there's horses. There's horses in the yard right now eating the lawn.
That's a
Um,
dream.
it's a beautiful little. It's a beautiful little dream life. So I raise pork and lamb, and I sell chicken eggs, and I sometimes raise chicken and rabbits and stuff, but the farm goods are mostly pork, lamb, and homemade goat's milk soap, so I make those. I sell almost everything online to my customer base. I sell my pork through like a community supported agriculture. And that's when you basically subscribe to a farm. And if they're like a vegetable farm, you pay like $500 in the spring. And then every week you pick up a crate of vegetables and you just get that for a whole year, fresh produce. So with meat farmers, you can subscribe basically. And in advance, you buy a quarter pig or a half pig all at once. And these people are buying,
Yeah.
25, 50 pounds of meat at once.
My sister lives on a farm in Utah, and yeah, they did something like that. Sorry, interrupted you.
Yeah, they probably had cattle. You can interrupt, you're clarifying. Um, yeah, so I sell pork to customers, in what is like New York State or like the Cornell extensions, like freezer meat laws, because people are buying like a quarter or half of a whole animal. But, I make a lot of homemade soaps. I do a lot of graphic design work for folks, and I do mostly logo and branding work for farms, which is I've been
So
doing that for
fun.
10 years.
I love that.
Yeah, and, I also write. The goal is to be making half a living farming and half a living writing about the farm. So, I have a publication, I have a Substack, and that's where I've been writing about basically how the farm is what got me to come out of the closet, and I started writing about my experiences coming out, yeah, in my 30s, and I started a series for late bloomers, and people that have no interest in falconry or fly fishing or farming are finding me through, like, these late bloomer forums and being like, "I read your piece on Comp Pet." Yeah. So, like, I'm getting an audience that the audience I always wanted is
Mhm.
finally starting to find the farm. So, like, Substacks is something you can choose to pay for if you want to, or you can just sign up for free, but I wanted all that content to be free because I don't want anyone to have to pay to figure out who they are. Yeah, I did an essay on Compet, and that's been my most successful post about it so far. And because I've been writing about it, I've been hearing from other people, and people have been responding to like their Substack posts, like just responding to me in emails, being like, "Well, this is my story, and I'm
Mhm.
getting letters from people who live in like across the country and like, but we're going through the exact same thing. They could be like in a
Mhm.
city but they're just figuring out at like 35, 36, like, "Oh, there are people that are listening to this podcast, and this is the first time they're even considering that they're not." Like, I didn't even wanna consider that I wasn't straight. Like, it was like, it's amazing how Compet is the most successful campaign in American history.
Oh, it's totally patriarchy. Like, it's definitely based in
Yeah.
patriarchy and keeping women subservient to men and keeping them having sex with men.
I don't wanna get too political, but there seems to be a lot of people on the right, young, kinda like alt-right, like, we want the gender roles and we want the society. We were
Mhm.
sold, like, post World War II,
Mhm.
where, like, women were subservient to men. I feel like there are a lot of people that want that back just because to them it guaranteed a sort of, like, meaning and purpose, and I think there's a lot of men right now that just don't know how to be wanted when they're not needed.
But, like, even that was marketing. Like, during the war, women did amazing jobs in men's roles, traditional men's roles, coding, like decrypting, like just all kinds of things. And when the men came back, they were forced out of their roles. So many women were so happy working and so successful, so good at what they did, but were forced into motherly roles. And then it was all a marketing campaign from the government so that the men could come back and have jobs. And it was like they marketed this whole perfect wife, perfect mother fantasy. It wasn't even reality. The government forced it and made it reality. That's what's the worst part about it, you know?
One of the biggest red flags for myself that I knew I was queer but not dealing with it was my aversion to gay stuff. Like, I always talk about how I wouldn't let myself watch the L Word, I wouldn't read, like, any lesbian erotica, I would of and if I ran into a lesbian couple, I wanted them to like me, and I like, for reasons I didn't even understand, like, I wanted them to know I was cool, you know? And but I would go out of my way to not influence myself in any way because I it's the same reason I won't read Marie Kondo's organization book. Like, then I have to deal
Oh,
with
but
how
it's so
unorganized I
good.
am.
My closet is rainbow left to right.
Listen, I know it's a great book, it's just that I have to get my shit together to be ready to deal with getting organized. I just came out.
Don't read the book, watch the series, and then you'll like it's fun to watch and you'll be inspired. I'm telling you, this is the only way I fold shirts now is in the trifold. Like it changed my
I don't
life.
even know what that means.
Okay,
Alright, I'll give it a
I'm just
shot.
gonna tell you, you trifold the shirt and then you stack them vertically. So when you pull out a shirt, you're not like pulling out the whole stack. You're just pulling it out like a book from a
Oh,
bookshelf. I'm telling you,
my ex taught me that. I bet that's where they learned it.
that's where they learned it.
Like, you open a dresser and it's like a bookshelf, like, you can just
Yes,
see the spines of different T-shirts? Okay, that's
the
where
spines of
I thought
t-shirts.
they were genius.
That's exactly right.
Yes.
They
Yeah.
just picked it
Alright,
up
so I
from
am
Marie
practicing.
Kondo and they took credit.
But, like, that was just an example. Like, I didn't wanna be I didn't wanna think about being queer because it meant I had to deal with something I had been running from my whole life. And I think that it's like with people we know, there is like a sunk cost fallacy. Like, I have put so much energy and time into this identity, and it's almost as if they're a laughing stock of their own life for not that's another thing we learn about shame our whole lives, like shame that we're gay, and then we come out and we're ashamed we didn't know it sooner.
Yeah,
You know,
totally.
like it's like you just trade in one shame, like, "Oh, I was such a closeted weirdo, control freak, I couldn't deal with being gay, and now I am gay, and I missed dating women in my 20s and most of my 30s," you know?
Yeah, I'm convinced after doing so much therapy, including EMDR for reprocessing, I'm convinced shame is the hardest thing to heal and just the hardest thing to let go of.
It's like anxiety, like, something will fill a hole, like, it's like volume in a it's like liquid in a container, like, it just has to fill the space,
Yes, and
so,
it's a
like, you
physical,
you get over
very physical manifestation too. Do you have a pride flag up? How have you found queer community since coming out? And is it hard in a small town? Like, are you very open and out?
Yes, I do have a pride flag. I have several at the farm. Right in front of my house, there's a progress flag. I have one hanging in my barn. Like when one fades out front in the sun from a whole summer, I'll just move it somewhere else. So this is very openly, I'm openly, like professionally queer, like as a public figure. So um, that doesn't mean people know or care. Like in town, I'm not like the town mayor where I walk in a building, everyone's like, "Hey, Jenna," but like I assume people at, like, the grocery store and hardware store have figured out who I am. Yeah, I'm very open. The community here is small, but, I mean, I came out well, I'm 42 now, like, 8 years ago or so, so most my adult life. So I've had some time and I've lived in the same space for almost a decade of being out. So I have definitely built a community here, but it's not anything that comes to you. Like, it's not meetup.com and going to a couple of, like, beers and queers hikes and stuff. It's just like a relationship. You have to do the work to build community. And since I am a public person and I have this land, I try to host events and stuff and do things here. And like this summer we tried to get people together for a big like a like a queer women's, like, just kinda, like, potluck bonfire kinda hangout here at the farm, and, like, people are so busy, and it was during June, so, of course,
Oh,
everyone's
Pride
weekends
Month.
are
Yep.
filled with plans and stuff, yeah. But yeah, it's just, like, that so there are, like, our but I mean, for our little town here, like, our Cambridge has a pride festival here in town. It's like they have like Battenkill Valley Pride, which is so lovely and cute. And we have a local independent bookstore that has a great and amazing queer section. And
That's great.
there definitely is. I would say upstate New York is different than other parts of the country where there is that mix of like city and locals. But I think just because it's such a blue state and there's just not the public problem with being queer. I rarely ever get like blatant homophobic acts or like people yelling things from cars. That happens like maybe once a year. Like, and it's like a 17-year-old boy or something. It's not like no one who pays for their own toilet paper has treated me with homophobia. But there's still like that. There's the hardest thing about being queer in a small town is I'm a 42-year-old childless unmarried woman, and they don't know what to do with
That's
that.
the life,
It's like
though. That's the best life.
I mean, I think most people around here, and you could be the most liberal, open-minded, sweet people. They don't like if you don't have 4 kids to talk about or the PTA or like what your husband's doing this weekend, like if you're not in the same bar trivia club, like there is like a loneliness to not having a place. And everywhere I go, I use this metaphor all the time on my Substack. Being a queer woman in the country without kids or without a partner is like being a coyote. You're either wild and free and this admirable thing, or you're this kind of threat that is like on the outskirts and is a threat to farm and family. And I don't know in a small town if when people see me, if they're like want to get their binoculars or get their rifle. Like I don't know if I'm something that they want to study and learn and get to know better, or like if they're gonna like or when you pull into their house, there's like a big MAGA flag, and they're just like convinced that I want to do genders to their children or whatever they think. Like it's just so that's how I feel. That's just like the whole symbol of my late bloomer series is the coyote because that's how it feels to be a woman I think out here who's single and like you don't know how you're perceived, but you can't help who you are. So I think there's a bravery in rural queer people, and it's lovely to hear about, but the community is not gonna come to you. It's never gonna come to you. You have to create it, you have to build it, and sometimes it happens by accident, and sometimes it happens with just a couple group of friends building onto their group of friends, but over the last couple of years, yeah, there is definitely a queer community here, and it's fantastic, and if I can do that in a town of 2,000 people, like, living alone in the woods, it just takes time. So if you're new to where you are, give yourself time.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I feel like you told me kind of already what projects you're working on with the house and the farm, but is there anything else you wanna mention?
No, I'm just trying to I guess if you wanna read about coming out later in life, check out the Cold Antler Farm Substack.
Cold Antler Farm. And where else can people find you?
My books are wherever books are sold if you're interested in that, if you're farm curious like I was. I,
Do you wanna
uh,
list the
the
titles? And I don't think you've said your full name yet. So just so
oh,
people
my goodness.
know how to
I'm
find you. Yeah.
I'm Jenna Wogenrich. My last name is, Wogenrich, and, I'm an author of a couple books, mostly about none of them yet are about, like, queer theory or memoir, but right now, I've written a book called Made from Scratch, which was about living in Idaho and learning how to homestead as a full-time graphic designer, and then I wrote a book about moving to Vermont and getting and buying my first farm, the farm I live on now, and that book was called Barnheart. And then I wrote a book about just, there's, a chicken guide for how to raise chickens. If you look up my name on Amazon, you'll see my books and stuff. Yeah, wherever you check out books. Yeah, so that's what I'm doing. My goal is to be making a living full time from what I raise, write, or draw. This is like a true homestead.
Can I ask, have you written a book yet about being queer and coming out late? Or are you working on that?
I've tried I've been trying to sell that book and, I've not found a my agent has basically said if, like, memoirs aren't selling right now, and I don't believe that. I think that people would be dying to read a book about
Yeah,
someone
absolutely.
who had to learn how to train hawks on a mountain before she could kiss a girl. Like, that's an interesting book.
Um,
But,
Absolutely.
yeah, if you're a publisher and you're listening to this podcast, please get in touch. But mostly, I've decided to take it into my own hands, and my story is being told on the Substack, which
Okay.
people can pay to read or not pay to read. But I would love to write that book.
It's an awesome story. We have one more thing. I have this deck of cards that I made. Um, it's basically a question deck. I didn't feel like the straight ones were good enough, so I made a lesbian one.
Okay, great.
This could technically be on a straight one as well. What does self-love look like to you?
I think self-love for me is what it is for a lot of women, which is not not being ashamed to put yourself and your needs first sometimes. And I
Mhm.
think there's nothing we're taught as women more than like the saddest story I see in all these late bloomer places is, well, I can't leave him because he'll be so sad. Like I can't, I'll devastate him. I've already signed up for this. My children will hate me, and they never once think what like if their happiness is
Yes.
valid or worth it or you married someone who if you told them you were gay they'd like be upset with you and force you to stay. That sounds insane. That's not love. So
Mhm.
I think there's a lot of fear. I think self self-love is giving yourself permission to deserve happiness.
I love that
That's
so
what I'd say.
much. Yes. Ugh,
Thanks.
I love that so much. Thank you so much for being on. This was so much fun. You're an awesome person. You're
Thanks for
just
having me.
so magical
Shucks.
and
Thanks.
you have such a cool life and I'm glad that you're working on like creating community and inviting community into your life. I think that's something that everyone who listens to the podcast needs and like should pursue. And so, yeah, that's great. I really appreciate it. Okay,
Go ahead.
we're queer.
And we're way out here. There, here.
Yes, we are. Thank you.
2, 3, 4. Moved out here to get away. Hustle, the city just wasn't for me. Found a town that ain't worth noting. Skies and roads are wide and open. Feels like I'm getting back to my roots. Switched out my sneakers for a pair of boots. Just gotta find community. I know there's more out here like me. Cause we're here. Oh, I know we're here. Oh yeah, we're queer and way out here. Sometimes when I'm here really testing my patience, ran out of swipes, had to spam my location. 500 miles ain't really that far. You know, maybe I can fix my car. Hills and mountains and trees and stars. Beautiful, but it ain't no gay bar. So many queers across this nation. I hear every one of them saying we're here. Oh yeah, we're here. Oh yeah, we're queer and way out here.